This is the moment the entire conversation flipped in seconds. Because what started as a normal no-jumper discussion suddenly turned into one of the most uncomfortable face-to-face clashes between Charleston White and Adam22 that fans have ever seen. At first, everything looked calm. Standard podcast energy. Light debate. Typical back and forth. But then Charleston White stopped smiling. And everything changed. Out of nowhere, he looked straight at Adam22 and completely shifted the direction of the conversation, saying that No Jumper isn't just covering hip-hop culture anymore, it's actually playing a role in destroying it. The room didn't react at first. No laughter. No interruptions. No quick comeback. Just silence. That kind of silence that feels heavier than words. And in that exact moment, Adam22's expression changed too, because this wasn't just another controversial take for content anymore. It felt personal. Fans watching the clip say you can literally see the energy drain from the room the second Charleston doubles down on his point, refusing to soften his words or backtrack. And that's when people realized this wasn't a debate anymore. It was a confrontation. A real-time clash between two completely different perspectives on hip-hop media, one accusing the platform of damaging culture, and the other sitting right in front of him, forced to respond live. And now the internet is split in half. Was Charleston White exposing a truth nobody wants to say out loud? Or did he just take things way too far on camera? One thing is certain. The moment this conversation went quiet, that's when it got loud everywhere else online. And that silence didn't last long. Because the second Charleston White realized Adam22 wasn't immediately pushing back, he leaned even further into the conversation, almost like he knew the weight of what he was saying was already landing hard in the room. The energy inside the studio shifted from casual discussion to something far more intense. You could tell this wasn't the usual viral clip moment people are used to seeing from No Jumper. This felt more personal, more direct, and way more uncomfortable than anyone expected when the episode started. Charleston White didn't raise his voice at first. That's what made it worse. He stayed calm, almost calculated, as he continued breaking down his point about hip-hop media, interviews, and how platforms shape narratives that spread far beyond the podcast itself. But every sentence he added seemed to tighten the atmosphere. Because what he was saying wasn't just criticism, it was accusation. He basically suggested that the way No Jumper operates has changed the way audiences consume hip-hop conversations, and not in a positive direction. According to his perspective, the platform doesn't just document culture anymore. It amplifies chaos, controversy, and conflict for engagement. And that's when Adam22 finally started reacting. At first, it was subtle. A slight shift in posture, a careful nod, the kind of body language people use when they're trying to stay calm in a heated moment. But as Charleston continued, Adam began to realize this wasn't going to stay a light disagreement. This was turning into a direct challenge to the identity of the platform itself. And that's why fans watching later said they could feel the exact moment the dynamic changed. It wasn't when the words got louder, it was when the tone stopped feeling like entertainment and started feeling like confrontation. Adam22 tried to respond by bringing the conversation back to balance. He attempted to explain that No Jumper gives people a voice, that it reflects the culture rather than controls it. But Charleston White wasn't interested in soft explanations. He cut through the response almost immediately. Not disrespectfully at first, but firmly. And that firmness is what made the room tense again. Because once Charleston locks into a point, he doesn't usually step back. Instead, he doubles down until either the argument breaks or the other person fully engages on his level. And in this case, Adam had no choice but to engage. The conversation started getting sharper. The pauses between sentences became longer. Even the co-hosts and people sitting in the room started reacting differently, less laughter, less commentary, more watching and listening. It was like everyone realized they had shifted from recording content to witnessing a live ideological clash. Charleston White continued pushing his argument, emphasizing that platforms like No Jumper have massive influence over how hip-hop stories are told. He suggested that when controversial moments are highlighted repeatedly, they don't just entertain viewers, they shape perception, amplify tension, and sometimes distort reality. That's where things started to get even more uncomfortable, because Adam22 pushed back harder this time. He defended the platform's role in giving raw, unfiltered conversations a space to exist. He implied that people willingly participate in interviews and discussions, and that the platform isn't responsible for how audiences interpret or react to those moments afterward. But even as he spoke, the tension didn't ease. If anything, it increased. Because Charleston White wasn't just debating the business model, he was questioning the impact of it on culture itself. And that's a much deeper conversation than content creation or interview styles. At this point, viewers online began splitting into two sides. One group agreed with Charleston White, saying hip-hop media has become too focused on drama-driven content and less about meaningful conversation. They believe platforms like No Jumper thrive on conflict because it generates views, engagement, and viral clips. The other group defended Adam22, arguing that the platform simply documents what already exists in the culture. According to them, the issues people see in interviews are not created by media, they are revealed through open conversations. And that debate alone started fueling clips across social media. But inside the actual room, the energy was still tense. Because what makes moments like this go viral isn't just what is said, it's how people react while it's being said. And Adam's reactions were being analyzed frame by frame. People noticed when he paused before responding. They noticed when he avoided interrupting. They noticed when he chose calm words instead of escalating the argument. And those small details became the center of online discussion. Some viewers said Adam was being strategic, trying not to turn the conversation into chaos. Others said he was caught off guard and trying to maintain control in a situation that escalated too fast. Meanwhile, Charleston White kept the pressure consistent. He didn't let the topic drift. He kept returning to the same core argument, that hip-hop media platforms have responsibility and that influence comes with consequences, whether people admit it or not. And that's what kept the conversation locked in place. No one could really escape the direction it had taken. Even when attempts were made to lighten the mood or shift topics slightly, the conversation naturally pulled back into the central conflict. Because at that point, it wasn't about jokes anymore. It was about perspective. And neither side was willing to fully step away from their position. That's what made this moment different from typical podcast disagreements. It didn't feel like entertainment arguments designed for engagement. It felt like two strong opinions colliding in real time, with an audience watching every second of it unfold. And as the first part of the conversation continued, it became clearer and clearer that this wasn't going to resolve quickly. Because both Charleston White and Adam22 were locked into their views, and neither one was backing down easily. And that set the stage for what came next, a much deeper escalation that would push the entire discussion into even more uncomfortable territory. And once it became clear that neither side was backing down, the tone inside the room shifted again, this time into something even more intense and personal. Because the argument was no longer just about hip-hop media in general. It was now about responsibility and accountability. Charleston White leaned back for a moment, paused, and then continued in a more direct tone, almost like he was making sure every word landed clearly. He doubled down on his point that platforms like No Jumper don't just report culture, they actively shape how people see it. According to him, when controversial interviews go viral, the impact doesn't stay online, it spills into real-life conversations, real reputations, and real consequences. That's when the conversation stopped feeling abstract. It started feeling targeted. Adam22 immediately responded, this time more firmly than before. He pushed back on the idea that the platform is responsible for how audiences choose to react. He emphasized that guests come on willingly, they speak freely, and the internet decides what becomes viral, not the platform itself. But even as he said it, the tension didn't drop. Because Charleston White wasn't just listening to respond, he was listening to challenge the entire foundation of that argument. And that's where the clash deepened. Charleston began pointing out that influence doesn't require direct control. In his view, even if guests speak freely, the platform still decides what gets highlighted, clipped, and pushed into viral circulation. And that selection process, according to him, is exactly where the responsibility comes in. At that point, the room got noticeably quieter again. Even background reactions slowed down. Because everyone could sense the conversation was reaching a point where it wasn't just about opinions anymore, it was about principles. Online viewers started noticing the same thing. Clips circulating from this part of the conversation show a very different energy compared to the beginning. Less laughter, less interruption, more structured arguing, more focused responses, and a growing sense that both sides were carefully choosing words instead of reacting emotionally. But that carefulness actually made things more intense. Because when people stop joking and start choosing words carefully, it usually means the topic has real weight behind it. Charleston White continued pressing the idea that hip-hop media thrives on conflict-driven moments. He suggested that outrage is often more profitable than peace, and that viral culture rewards controversy over constructive conversation. According to him, this system encourages escalation rather than understanding. Adam22 responded by defending the openness of the platform again, emphasizing that No Jumper provides space for voices that mainstream media often ignores. He argued that the audience ultimately decides what becomes viral, not the creators themselves. But the disagreement wasn't just logical anymore, it was philosophical. Two completely different views of media were colliding in real time, and neither side was moving. At one point, Charleston leaned into a more direct challenge, questioning whether platforms like No Jumper can truly separate entertainment from impact. He implied that when certain moments go viral, they don't just stay as content, they become part of public narrative, shaping how people see individuals and entire communities. That statement changed the energy again. Because Adam22's response this time wasn't immediate. There was a noticeable pause. A moment where he gathered his thoughts before responding. And that pause became one of the most replayed moments online. Viewers started analyzing it in detail, debating whether it was hesitation, reflection, or simply careful communication under pressure. But regardless of interpretation, it became clear that the conversation had reached its most sensitive point. The co-hosts in the room also began reacting differently. Instead of laughing or adding jokes, they stayed quiet, occasionally nodding, sometimes looking between both speakers as the argument unfolded. It no longer felt like a podcast segment designed for entertainment. It felt like a live debate with real emotional weight behind it. Charleston White kept his stance consistent, reinforcing that media influence carries responsibility whether people acknowledge it or not. He argued that ignoring that responsibility doesn't make it disappear, it just shifts the consequences elsewhere. Adam22 pushed back again, stating that limiting conversation or controlling narratives goes against the entire purpose of open platforms. And that's where the divide became permanent in the discussion. Because neither side was willing to concede even slightly. At this stage, viewers online started splitting even more aggressively. Comment sections became debates within debates. Clips were being cut to favor different perspectives. Some viewers highlighted Charleston's strongest statements, while others focused on Adam's defenses. And that's what pushed the moment into viral territory. Not just the argument itself, but the fact that everyone saw something different in it. Meanwhile, inside the room, the conversation began to slowly stabilize, but the tension never fully disappeared. Instead, it turned into a controlled disagreement, less explosive, but still deeply divided. Both sides continued speaking, but now with more structure and less interruption. However, even in that calmer state, the core disagreement remained unresolved. Charleston White believed media platforms must consider their cultural impact. Adam22 believed platforms should remain open spaces for unrestricted dialogue. Two strong viewpoints, neither willing to shift. And that unresolved tension is exactly what kept this moment alive online long after the episode ended. Because viewers weren't just watching a debate anymore. They were watching a reflection of a much bigger question in modern media. Where does responsibility end and free expression begin? And as this second part of the conversation closed, it became obvious that this wasn't just another viral argument. It was a fundamental clash of ideology, one that neither side had fully answered yet. And even after all that tension, the conversation still wasn't fully over. Because what happened next is what finally pushed this entire moment into viral, internet debate territory. As the discussion slowly started winding down, there was a brief attempt to lighten the mood. A few side comments were made, a couple of small reactions from the room, and for a second it looked like the intensity might finally settle. Just two strong viewpoints that collided, held their ground, and eventually moved forward without changing direction. And that's exactly why this clip hit so hard online. Because viewers aren't just reacting to what was said, they're reacting to what it represents. A bigger conversation about hip-hop media, influence, and responsibility that is still happening across platforms every single day. And as the clip fades out, one thing becomes clear. This wasn't just a podcast argument. It was a reflection of how modern culture debates truth, influence, and power in real time, in front of millions watching online. And that's why people are still talking about it long after it ended. If you made it this far, then you already know this wasn't just another podcast debate. This was a full-on clash of ideologies between Charleston White and Adam22 that has the internet completely split right now. Now I want to know what you think about it. Was Charleston White right when he said no jumper is destroying hip-hop culture and pushing too much negativity for views? Or do you agree with Adam22 that platforms are just giving people a space to speak freely and the audience decides what goes viral? Drop your opinion in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of moment where the internet never agrees, and that's what makes it even more interesting. Also, if you're into raw hip-hop debates, podcast drama, and unfiltered celebrity reactions like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. Because we break down moments like this the way nobody else does, line by line, reaction by reaction, without missing the details everyone else ignores. There's always another argument, another leak, and another explosive reaction coming in this space, and you don't want to miss it when it drops first. Hit the like button if you want more deep breakdowns like this, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next viral moment we cover. Because in this game, one clip can change the whole story overnight.